What a disappointment Australia's media have become. They've become an unacceptable farce, and rather than being the purveyors of truth, they seem to have become a vehicle for spreading government misinformation, and they're doing it through blind naivety. Independent factual reporting should be the basis of honest, objective stories, but it's not, and Australia's media seems to be failing. What is evident, though, is the inability of many journalists to critically analyse. It's all too easy for many to accept what's spoon-fed to them rather than doing their research. And running stories straight off of media releases without actually checking and taking the words of spin doctors is sloppy journalism. Now, to quote a much respected media colleague, many of today's journos simply seem to have become cafe latte journos, and there's much to agree with such insightful wisdom. Recently, Doherty Institute released its Doherty Report. That report was commissioned by the federal government to model what Australia needs to do to move forward once vaccination thresholds of 70 and 80% have been reached. Now, people should understand how close the federal government and the Doherty Institute have become. The Doherty Institute seems to have become the go-to source for research and commentary. But just carrying the name of the great Professor Peter Doherty doesn't necessarily mean that it's fit for purpose or has provided the best advice. The report that was released is flawed on many levels. It's a trove of false assumptions that could have only been provided by the federal government, and it's been used for the purpose of driving a particular narrative. The federal government were given a report that has allowed it to create hollow hope. Now, on close analysis, the Institute's assumptions simply don't stack up. They've made assumptions based on thresholds that seem half-cooked. Actual experts who intrinsically understand modelling have declared the report to be flawed. Just last week, here on The Informer, we ran an interview on the issue with world vaccine expert Dr. Nikolai Petrovsky. He described the modelling as flawed. Now, what is a concern is the false hope being sold by the media based on that report. The media is running stories around vaccination thresholds and what Australia must do to move forward. But the media failed to assess and analyse the report's findings. And if the media did read it, then it's failed to understand why the report should have been questioned, viewed with scepticism, or at worst condemned. Instead, they've given it credence, and they shouldn't have. The report's modelling has been formulated on questionable assumptions to produce an outcome that just does not seem reflective of truth or reality. The report has more holes in it than Swiss cheese, and the media should have picked up on that. Now, moving forward for Australia, just reaching the vaccination thresholds of 70 and 80% isn't happening. Citing the report, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said that once 80% double doses were achieved, that you have to open up. Yet in the Doherty report, it clearly says that this opening up is in conjunction with lockdowns, masks and social distancing. That's hardly opening up. Now, according to Doherty, modelling at 70%, Australia would have to double ICU capacity. At the 70% threshold reached, 1,500 doctors and 15,000 ICU nurses, along with paramedics, ventilators, all the other staff and patient transport and equipment would be needed. If we look at 20% of COVID deaths in New South Wales this year have occurred due to outbreaks in public hospitals, how will the health system cope? These figures are in the actual Doherty report. Now, for Australia to move on, it must understand it has to live with COVID, not rely on vaccines as a panacea, because they aren't. It's going to require coordinated strategies where states buy into a uniform policy using vaccines, rapid antigen testing, and everything else in the arsenal to produce an effective program to get moving again. Now, the time has come to step up and not rely on half-baked reports where the media misinform Australians. Leadership, trust and confidence is what Australians require, and not being fed bullshit.